It began with a single slap. A moment that froze the world, shattered reputations, and forever changed one of Hollywood's most celebrated families. Cameras flashed, gasps filled the air, and in that instant, Will Smith, the man once known for charm, laughter, and blockbuster hits, crossed a line that even time has struggled to erase. What followed wasn't just a fall from grace. It was the slow, public unraveling of a dynasty. Fame, ego, love, and illusion collided, leaving behind the fragments of a family that had once seemed untouchable. The night of the Oscars was supposed to be a celebration. But when Will Smith stepped onto that stage, everything he had built in decades crumbled in seconds. The man who had been Hollywood's favorite son became its biggest scandal. The laughter stopped. The applause died. What remained was silence and shame. In the days that followed, the industry that had once crowned him king turned its back. Studios cut ties. Projects were canceled. And suddenly, Will found himself adrift in a sea of public outrage. Not even his family wanted to stand beside him. The image of success he had spent a lifetime building vanished overnight. This was not just about a slap. It was about the mask finally breaking, revealing the cracks beneath the Hollywood smile. As the months passed, Will disappeared. No movies, no interviews, no red carpets, only whispers of what he would do next. The world waited for his apology, for his comeback, for redemption. But what came instead would leave everyone speechless for a very different reason. When Will returned, it wasn't with a film or an inspiring speech. It was with a song called Pretty Girls. He sat in a therapist's chair in the music video, confessing his problem, that he liked attractive women. Then, the beat dropped. What followed was 3 minutes of awkward rhymes about vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry flavors. It was not empowerment. It was embarrassment. The internet reacted instantly. TikTok users mocked it. Reddit threads exploded. Even fans who had defended him after the Oscars finally gave up. Critics tore it apart. Pitchfork gave the album a brutal 2.4 rating. Rolling Stone called it clunky, desperate, and hollow. The Independent said it lacked soul, energy, and honesty. But the words that hurt most came from the public. The people who once danced to Miami and Getting Jiggy with It now laughed at him. The same man who once made the world move now made it cringe. It wasn't just a bad song. It was a man trying to prove he still mattered and failing spectacularly. Commercially, it was even worse. The album, based on a true story, didn't just flop. It evaporated. It didn't appear on the Billboard 200. In the United Kingdom, it sold just 268 copies in its first week. 268. For context, small-town bands often sell more at local bars. What was once superstardom had become humiliation. The man who filled stadiums could not even fill a playlist. Will Smith, the box office giant, now faced an audience of none. Every review, every comment, every meme chipped away at what little dignity he had left. The jokes spread faster than any of his songs. And the saddest part? He seemed unaware. He kept posting, kept smiling, kept pretending. But the world had moved on. The album wasn't just a failure, it was a mirror, a reflection of a man still trapped in the past, clinging to an image that no longer existed. The Prince of Bel-Air had become a ghost of his own legend. Then came the moment that truly defined his desperation. During his European tour, Will posted a video online. It showed him performing in front of a massive cheering crowd, arms raised, fans screaming, energy electric. For a brief second, it looked like redemption, until people looked closer. The faces were wrong. The hands were distorted. The movement unnatural. The crowd wasn't real. It was generated by artificial intelligence. A fake audience for a fading star. The internet erupted in disbelief. Imagine being this rich and still needing fake fans. One comment said, "You used to be cool," another wrote. It was more than just a bad decision. It was symbolic. The man who once inspired millions now relied on algorithms to pretend they still cared. And when the truth spread, his tour had to be scaled down. Smaller venues, smaller crowds, smaller dreams. From sold-out arenas to digital ghosts, Will's fall had become something no movie could dramatize. The illusion had finally turned on its master. And all that remained was silence where applause used to be. But Will wasn't done trying. He turned back to what once made him a legend, acting. When Bad Boys, Ride or Die hit theaters in 2024, he hoped it would be his moment of redemption. The movie made money, Yes, but not respect. Audiences described it as hollow, predictable, forced. The charm was gone. It felt like a man acting out a version of himself that no longer existed. Behind the scenes, reports surfaced that his agents were calling studios, begging for work. They used the film as a test, to see if the world still wanted Will Smith. But even in success, it felt empty. A Hail Mary disguised as a comeback. A sequel to a life that should have ended chapters ago. The irony was painful. Will had once said he never wanted to make sequels just because people would watch them. Yet here he was, doing exactly that. His career had become a rerun of itself, predictable, tired, and sad. This was no longer about fame. It was about survival. A man who once defined coolness, now begging to be remembered. But Hollywood had already decided. His time was over, and while the cameras turned away from him, a darker story was unfolding. One that would expose not just a man, but an entire family built on illusion. When the lights faded on Will's career, the cracks in the rest of the Smith family began to show. For years, they had been Hollywood's royal family. Perfect smiles, perfect children, perfect life. But behind the red carpets and talk shows, something darker had been growing. A quiet exhaustion, a need to stay relevant no matter the cost. And when the truth finally came out, the world realized that the Smith family hadn't just fallen. They had been falling for years. In October 2023, Jada Pinkett Smith sat in front of cameras to promote her new memoir, Worthy. She smiled, spoke softly, and then dropped a truth that shattered the illusion of Hollywood's most famous marriage. She revealed that she and Will had actually been separated since 2016, 7 years before the Oscars slap that had shocked the world. The revelation was like an earthquake. The man who had shouted, "Keep my wife's name out of your mouth," had done so for a woman who was no longer his wife in any real sense. The perfect marriage the public had worshipped was nothing more than a performance. They had kept up the act for the cameras, for movie roles, for the image. Suddenly, that infamous moment on stage took on new meaning. It wasn't love. It wasn't loyalty. It was illusion, a desperate attempt to hold on to something already gone. When the news spread, the world's sympathy turned to disbelief. The Smiths hadn't just lied to each other, they had lied to everyone. And as Jada's book hit shelves, it became clear that Worthy wasn't about healing. It was about exposure. Every page pulled the curtain back a little more, until there was nothing left but exhaustion and pity. The empire that had been built on authenticity was now being destroyed by it. The release of Worthy was supposed to mark Jada's big moment, her story, her truth. Instead, it became another chapter in the family's public downfall. The reviews were merciless. Readers called it self-indulgent, poorly written, completely unnecessary. On Google, only 23% of readers recommended it. The memoir rollout became a punchline, with podcasts and late-night shows mocking the endless oversharing. Even Saturday Night Live joined in. What was meant to be empowerment turned into exhaustion. "We just lived through Jada's memoir rollout," one critic said, "and I'm tired." But the damage went deeper than bad reviews. Every revelation chipped away at what little privacy the Smiths had left. Every confession became a headline. Every truth became a meme. Jada had built her career on openness, on telling it all. But now, there was nothing left to tell. The public wasn't inspired anymore. They were uncomfortable. The woman who once invited the world to her red table now stood alone, surrounded by the wreckage of her own transparency. Behind the scenes, the cost of the slap went far beyond public image. It hit their business, their income, their power. Will and Jada's media company, Westbrook, once a thriving powerhouse that produced films, shows, and online projects, began to crumble. Before 2022, it had brought in over $170 million a year. After the slap, that number dropped to $100 million. Deals were canceled. Staff were laid off. Major partners walked away. It wasn't just business. It was symbolic. The Smith brand had become radioactive. Nobody wanted to be tied to them. Not studios, not advertisers, not fans. In a desperate attempt to stay relevant, Will began appearing in random collaborations with influencers, chasing virality like a man chasing his own shadow. The same man who once commanded global attention was now begging the internet to notice him again. Meanwhile, Jada continued to turn their pain into content, discussing their marriage, their children, their trauma, all for clicks, for sympathy, for control. The Smith family wasn't living anymore. They were performing their downfall in real time. For Jaden and Willow, fame was not a dream. It was a birthright and a curse. From the moment they were born, cameras followed. Expectations suffocated. In interviews, Jaden admitted he never felt normal. "People treat me like I'm not human," he said. And maybe he was right. At the 2025 Grammy Awards, that inner chaos took physical form. He arrived wearing a literal castle on his head, a bizarre, glittering fortress called the Vampire Castle. Some called it fashion, others called it a cry for help. But it wasn't the castle that angered people most. It was what came after. In 2024, Jaden was named Christian Louboutin's first men's creative director, a title many saw as pure nepotism. Overnight, the internet exploded with backlash. Real designers, real artists, felt robbed. "Another celebrity kid skipping the line," one critic wrote. Jaden tried to rise above it, but old interviews resurfaced, moments where he mocked other teenagers for not wanting to discuss the political and economic state of the world. The memes flooded in, screens filled with images of him lecturing children about climate policy at birthday parties. He laughed it off, posting a self-aware meme of his own. But behind the humor, there was sadness. A boy who had never been allowed to be a boy. A man who had inherited not just fame, but all its emptiness. Even his support of his father's Oscars slap, tweeting, "And that's how we do it," showed how deep the confusion ran. In a world where fame meant righteousness, wrong started to look like strength. That Willow's story mirrored her brother's, but with its own tragic irony. Once celebrated for her raw talent and emotional honesty, she too fell into controversy. In August 2025, she posted a crying selfie online with an explicit caption that shocked her audience. When fans criticized her, instead of apologizing, she called them dense, accusing them of not understanding her humor. The backlash was swift. Then came her debut novel, Black Shield Maiden, a fantasy story that included offensive descriptions of Muslim North Africans as dangerous and constantly at war. The outrage was immediate. Hollywood, the press, and readers condemned it as tone-deaf and ignorant. It was supposed to be a work of empowerment, but instead, it became proof that the Smith family had completely lost touch with reality. Each of them, Will, Jada, Jaden, and Willow, had become caricatures of what fame does to people who live too long under the spotlight. They no longer represented inspiration or creativity. They represented warning. The fake crowds, the oversharing, the nepotism, the arrogance. They had become a reflection of everything wrong with Hollywood itself. A world where attention means more than truth, and where families can crumble while smiling for the cameras. The Smith family once had everything: love, fame, power. But in their desperate attempt to stay seen, they lost what mattered most: authenticity. Now, their story stands as a cautionary tale, a reminder that fame may open doors, but it also builds cages. And once the lights go out, those cages start to close. The family that once had it all is now the story Hollywood wishes it could forget.